as we're recording this, we're just on the eve of an election call. But before I get your thoughts on that, which I definitely want to hear, our BC hydro rates are going up 7.5% over the next 2 years. Why the increase?
Well, I mean, for starters, the government is saying, we promised you that we would hold hydro rate increases to the rate of inflation. Well, that's not what they're doing here. The increase is 7.5% over 2 years. The government's budget, which we were just given a few weeks ago, says the inflation rate is just a little over 4% for the next 2 years. So they've jumped past the inflation rates. They say hydro needs the money. Hydro has been importing electricity from United States and Alberta because there's a drought. They're getting ready to start paying for Site C, and as we know, it's 100% over budget. And of course, there's other pressures on the economy as well. It would be a rare announcement from the government that didn't make some kind of reference to the Donald Trump tariffs. So anyway, the interesting thing about this, of course, is the government says hydro needs the money. And they've told the Utilities Commission to approve the increase. They've given them 10 days to approve the increase. So we asked the government, how do you know how much money hydro needs, right? And well, they asked hydro. So they asked the agency that's supposed to be the Crown Corporation, that's supposed to be regulated by the Utilities Commission. They asked them, oh, how much do you need? And so hydro said, well, how about 7.5%? So they told the commission to approve it. This is the exact opposite of what regulating utilities should be. The regulators should decide whether the increase is justified, and the regulator should ask the tough questions that, why do you need this much? Would you need this much if the government hadn't taken $700 million out of your accounts for political giveaways? And, the other thing is the BC Utilities Commission, which the New Democrats said was going to be independent, the commission can grant an interim rate increase while it conducts the full proper examination of whether or not the increase is necessary. So this is... The NDP in opposition said the Utilities Commission should be independent and respected. And now anytime they want money, they just tell it what to do. The give back on our ICBC bills this year, $110, that's also the cabinet ordered the Utilities Commission to approve that. So the idea of independent regulation under the NDP is a thing of the past.
You mentioned the Trump tariffs. Trump was blamed in part for the NDP scrapping its $120 million program that was set up to provide loans to homeowners to build or upgrade secondary suites. And that was announced, just a year ago?
Less than a year ago. They've been talking about it for months, but the actual announcement occurred on May 2nd last year. And the government said it was going to put $120 million a max into a forgivable loan fund, so $40 million a year. And it would lead to 1,000 secondary suites or laneway houses was the other possibility. You had to be a homeowner to qualify. You had to have income in the 200,000 range. You had to have the paperwork all done. And you had to agree that if you got the government money, so the government was going to give you $40,000 forgivable for your project, you had to agree that you would charge below market rates for 5 years. So they announced it. You go back over the coverage at the time. A lot of people in the industry went, actually, what it costs to build a secondary suite these days, that's not a lot of money that you're offering people.
No.
And the other thing people said was, 5-year rent cap below market rate when costs and everything else are going up. They predicted there wouldn't be much take-up. Well, we discovered this week there wasn't much take-up. The target for the first year was 1,000 of these deals, 1,000 secondary suites. But as I say, there was skepticism in the industry that there would be that many takers. And in fact, there weren't that many takers. They abandoned the program, shut it down effective March 30th this week. And there were only 200 takers, another 50 in process. And the government has just said it's not working. They blamed they didn't take any responsibility for not knowing the market. They said, well, first of all, of course, Donald Trump. Donald Trump. So, you know, the plan has been in place for 10 months. And how long has Donald Trump been talking? Well, there weren't many takers to begin with. And the other thing, this is interesting. They said, well, you know, Ottawa's got a better plan. So the federal government is out pandering for votes too, and BC is taking the money for the second and third year of the program, so $80 million, and they're going to put it somewhere else in their housing plan. So they're not using it to reduce the deficit or borrowing. They're going to spend it somewhere else.
All right. Well, you mentioned pandering. The Liberal government, all of the federal parties will soon be pandering to voters. How do you expect the race to shake down in BC, or what are you looking for?
Well, you know, it's funny. I went away for holidays, as you know, for 2 weeks at the end of January and the first week of February, and I came back to find politics had been turned inside out. So for months, the Conservatives were expecting to take most of the seats in British Columbia, except for the ones that the federal NDP was going to take. And all those expectations have been revised. Start with the NDP. Provincial New Democrats are very worried that the federal party is going to be wiped out or reduced to a seat or two in BC because the electorate's polarizing, and they're polarizing around a single question: who is best able to deal with Donald Trump? A lot of people say Mark Carney, and the rest of them say, well, no, I think Pierre Poilievre's the best bet. But no one is. The NDP vote is kind of going to the Liberals. So the NDP's worried that they're going to be reduced to a seat or two in BC. The Conservatives are finding that a lot of their seats are now competitive with the federal Liberals. And you're starting to hear all of a sudden people going, you know what? I think I might want to run for the federal Liberals because I got a shot at winning. So they're circulating Christy Clark's name on, you know, phone calls. I heard from somebody the other night who had a phone call and said, what would you think of Christy Clark as your MP? We've had the story. Gregor Robertson, former mayor of Vancouver, is talking about running for the federal Liberals. And I started wondering about Andrew Weaver, the former leader of the Greens. For a while, he seemed to be thinking of federal politics. And then he kind of realized that, you know, Liberal brand wasn't necessarily going to be a winning one. But I sort of wonder if he's reactivating his ambitions as well. I mean, people look at the opinion polls and they go, this is going to be a hotly contested election in British Columbia, and the Liberals have a shot at it, and it could end up being a series of two-way races between the Liberals and the Conservatives.
Interesting. Well, it's very different. We just came out of a provincial election where the NDP, you know, won and got significantly more votes. They're outpolling, I guess, the federal party by at least 4-1. I would think at this point in the province.
Yeah, I mean, and that's true. And a generation ago, maybe 2 generations ago, a UBC political scientist, Donald Blake, wrote a whole book about British Columbians and the way they see federal and provincial politics. And he said they inhabit 2 political worlds. The parties they look at and vote for provincially are not necessarily the same parties they vote for and follow federally. And he based that book on an election in 1969 where we had a provincial election in the middle of a federal election. And people, you know, voters aren't dumb. They sort this out. They understand the labels. And so, yes, we just had a provincial election where the NDP did really, really well and the Conservatives did well. And the Liberals, well, the Liberals changed their name to BC United and then sort of committed suicide. So they weren't really a factor. This this election now is going to be very different, night and day different.